I'm going to use the starter builds. I think that's a good way to save some time and to also learn how the starter build functions. So I'm gonna use those. Okay, so this is the Drakthir. This is the Devastation damage spec. I'm gonna take myself actually over to a target dummy just for a minute, and build, like, try out my buttons as I put them on my bar. Do kind of a Drakthir button tour, if you will. If you're new to Evoker, you'll notice these little bubbles underneath my unit frame. Those are my essences. That's your Evoker. They generate on their own. You can get procs that allow you to use the essence spenders without consuming them, but generally speaking, you're just kind of waiting for them to come back like Death Knight runes. This button, our first one on the bar here, is Disintegrate. It costs 3 essences. It's a single target damage spell, and both healers and DPS can use this. Healers may want to consider whether they want to use their essences for that, but it's going to do some damage over time, and it's going to consume some essences. That's one of your best ways to, like, laser down a mob in single target when you're out questing, is Disintegrate. I have, I think, more essences because I think I have a maximum essences of 6, and that's because I'm a Devastation Evoker that has a point in Power Nexus. So by default, your count is 5. All right, let's go through the bar and find something else. Blessing of the Bronze, that's our buff. That's nice and easy. That's your raid buff, and it reduces the cooldown of a major movement ability. So for me, that's Hover, because Hover is my movement ability. We'll throw that in a bar next, but like a priest that's in a group with Blessing of the Bronze on is going to have a shorter cooldown on, like, Feather or something like that. Azure Strike is kind of this weird filler spell that I haven't really gotten the hang of where it goes in my rotation. It's an instant cast. It's not a builder or a spender. It's an instant cast. It cleaves. It goes on to up to 3 enemies, and it just does some damage. It has the ability to proc Essence Burst. So I guess it's a filler that you can spam in between doing more important things that has a chance to make your next Disintegrate or Pyre, but we'll get there, cost no essence. So I suppose it's a filler spell. I'm going to put it... I don't know where I'm going to put it is the thing. I'm going to put it on a bad keybind. I might come back and put it somewhere better later. Deep Breath is a 2-minute cooldown, big old 2-minute cooldown. This is one you've probably seen before. And this lets you travel quite far if you want. You can go up to... See how far we can go with this thing. You can choose to do minimum range or maximum range. You can swivel around and aim where you want to go. But this is going to do damage to everything in the path. So you know how, like, DKs can send a dragon over stuff? In this version, you are the dragon. You're going to do big damage to everything under you with that. It's on a 2-minute cooldown, and both Healing and Devastation Evokers will have that. And you can use it to reposition yourself as well. I mean, it takes a second to set up. It's not a fast way to reposition, but you will reposition. There's a talent point you can take, and I forget where, but there's a point you can take in the tree somewhere that gives you recall. Yeah, so I have recall, which allows me to reactivate Deep Breath to go back to where I came from. So if you don't want to reposition yourself and you have a talent point spent in recall, you can use that to kind of boop yourself back to where you started. So that you don't have to contend with the position change, but there's what that is. Little mouth beam. I look bluer than I did before. This is all default UI. I've edited it in edit mode, but I'm not using any add-ons. There's no add-ons in use here. Emerald Blossom is a heal, and it's also in healing spec. It's going to be an essence spender. If you're not in healing spec, it doesn't cost any essence. It just costs some mana. It's an instant cast, and it's going to make this big ol' ring that pops after a couple of seconds for big healing. It's a great way to heal stack groups of players. It's a perfectly good way to heal yourself, assuming that you stay within that range. It's annoying to use if you're in a Mythic Plus group and you're trying to, like, pick everybody up, but everybody's running to the next boss because they're gonna run out of your ring before it goes off, but I guess you just don't use it for that. Expunge is a dispel, and it is a poison dispel. You can remove poisons. Fire Breath. Here we go. There's a good DPS button. This is also a button that's going to be available to healers and damage evokers. And it's a cone. It's also one of your first empower spells. So you're going to see at the bottom of my screen, here's my cast bar. You see how it's got, like, all these different segments in it? You hold down the button to progress through the segments. And then you, depending on how much you powered it up, it'll do different things. So right now it has 4 different empower levels. Actually, you know what I can probably do? Edit mode. HUD tooltip. I think I can move the HUD tooltip so you guys can actually see it. There we go. Let's do that. Save and exit. Nice. Okay, so now I can actually like mouse over this, and anybody that wants to raid it can raid it. Fancy. So yeah, it'll do more damage over a longer period of time based on how far you powered it up. You have two options for how you want to do that. You can hold down the key to kind of like charge it up, and then you let go at any point that you want to cast it. Or the thing that I am going to do, and that I think a lot of people are going to do, is you go into controls, you go to empowered spell input, and you change this to press and tap. Because for me at least, in WoW, holding down a button feels weird and bad. So what you can do instead is, and we'll wait for it to come off cooldown here, with press and tap enabled, you press it once to start charging it up, and then you tap it again whenever you feel like you're done, and then that's going to work as well. So Fire Breath puts a dot on things as well. So here, let's turn on our enemy nameplates. Interface, enemy nameplates always show. There we go. So I should be able to press and tap 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. And then you get yourself a nice little dot. 701 fire damage every 1.7 seconds for however long that was. One thing I actually want to kind of sit here and test is I want to figure out if I wanted to cast a rank 4 Fire Breath. Am I waiting until the thing is full, or can I do it after it gets in that last thing? Let's do it again. Because if I cast a rank 4 Fire Breath, it should be a 16-second debuff instead of 12 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, yeah, that was. Okay. So you don't need to fill the bar up completely. You just need to make it past that last segment to get into that top rank. Anyways, continuing our tour of Evoker spells for anybody new to them, because there's definitely some people that haven't seen them before. Fury of the Aspects. It's Bloodlust. Woo! You can Bloodlust yourself. It's called Fury of the Aspects. It's a lust like anything else. 30% haste, 5-minute cooldown, etc., etc. Evokers are a lust class, and you have the option to bring that to your group. Not the option. You're going to bring that to your group. You don't have to spec into it. It's just something you get. Landslide is a CC spell. It's a CC spell you spec into. I actually often don't, but the beginner starter build does have it. And what it's going to do is it's going to root enemies within a path for 5 seconds. So if you're being hit by a bunch of stuff and it hurts and you're like, no, please, stop. I'll tell you everything I know. Then you can do this. It looks really cool. And then anything that's in that path will get rooted, and then you can just go leave. You could even leave with hover if you want, which is your sprint. I've got 2 charges of this right now. It's a 30-second recharge. Hover will zoop you forward, especially if you jump first. And then it gives you a little bit of a movement speed bonus. You can see my little hover icon there. Movement speed increased by 30%. So that falls off. If you jump before you hover, you can actually... I don't know why that's not working. Maybe you have to be leaning on the key. Weird. Anyways, while hovering, you can also cast hard cast spells while moving whenever your sprint is active, but that does not count for empower spells. We haven't gotten to any cast spells, but we will soon. Does their lust have a different animation? Here, let's find out. Are you ready? Rah! Ooh, yeah, it's rainbowy. It's rainbowy. Look at all that. Look at those fingers. You got some real rainbow magic on your hands. I wanted to see if I can, so I'm leaning forward. There we go. Maybe you have to be pressing the movement key if you want hover to zoop you forward. It should burst you forward, launch yourself, but it's working better for me if I jump and lean on my W before I do it. Evoker cannot be res. I don't believe that they have a be res. Here's Living Flame. Here's one of your cast spells. It's kind of a nice little filler. It will do damage to an enemy or healing to an ally. Nice and convertible like that, so you can spam it to do DPS. It's actually doing a little bit of a dot, and that's because of a talent point here somewhere. I don't know what talent point. Maybe that one? Yeah, Living Flame is dealing damage over time, and healing over time because of the talent point, but generally speaking, it's just like a hard cast spammable filler heal or hard cast spammable damage. Functions as both. I keep 2 buttons for this, actually. I keep, especially as a damage evoker, I keep one of them that I use as a self-heal, because Living Flame is a valuable spammable heal on yourself while you're leveling, right? However, if you still have your enemy targeted, then by default, it's going to cast the offensive version of it on your enemies. So I make a macro that basically casts Living Flame at me and throw that on the bar in my usual self-heal spot, so that even if I'm targeting an enemy, I'm still going to heal myself with it. And then I would have another button for Living Flame that's just like a regular one that I could use for whatever. But that's how I've been getting around that, because at least when I was first leveling on beta, I would continually run into this problem where I was like trying to spam heals myself. I'm almost dead. I'm being attacked. And all I'm doing is DPSing with this little filler spell when I wanted to be healing myself. Yes, you should also be using Emerald Blossom and a bunch of other stuff to heal yourself, but I like having this little Living Flame macro. All right, here's another spell. It's your defensive. It's Obsidian Scales. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown. It gives you a ton of armor. It reduces your magic damage taken. Lasts for 12 seconds. Beautiful. Something I've always wanted as a priest is a nice, thick, chunky defensive spell, and Evokers have one. It's called Obsidian Scales. Here's what it looks like. A little rocky. You get like this little armor icon on your front and back, your little magic scales. You get this little dirt effect, little sparkle dirt. Okay, here's the interrupt. It's a ranged interrupt. It's on a 25-yard range, 20-second cooldown for Devastation Evokers. Healing Evokers can also take the interrupt, but they won't have as short of a cooldown on it. The shortened cooldown comes from this talent point imposing presence over in the Devastation tree. So if you're healing, you will be able to take a kick. The kick itself should be on the tree over here, unless they moved it. I thought Quell was on the tree somewhere. Yeah, here it is. The kick itself you have to put a point into on the regular Evoker tree, and by default it has like a 40-second cooldown, but DPS can do it more often. I wanted to look at the interrupt animation because for some reason that's important to me. If you interrupt, looks like that. You go, ah! Head up. You've kicked them. Good job. Okie dokie. Rescue. Here's a fun spell. I can't show you this one unless somebody's in my group, but you guys will have seen this on streams and stuff. Basically, it's a thing that you talent into in the Evoker tree, so both types of Evoker can do this if they take the spell. It's over here. 1 minute cooldown, you swoop to an ally and fly with them to the target location. So basically, you would have somebody in your group, you target them, and then you use Rescue and you target a spot on the ground, and then your character would swoop over to the player, pick them up, and then move them ahead. It's great for run backs, actually. If you're running back as an Evoker, you're pretty fast because of hover, and you've got like some priest or death knight in the back that's lagging behind, you can target them, and then you can rescue them to forward. So your character will leap back and grab them, and then leap really far forward, and you can help people get back to the raid faster. You can also use it much like a life grip. People are worried about griefing, but I think that if you're worried about griefing, you need better friends. The jump to heal called now. That is rescue. What did I call this one? Wait a second. Hang on a minute. I'm having my world broken. You're right. That used to be called rescue. This used to be called fly with me. Now the swoop to an ally and fly with him to a target location is called rescue. Verdant embrace? We think that's less clunky than having this one called fly with me. I mean, I guess rescue makes sense for this one. I just want a better name for this than Verdant Embrace. It's capacitor totem all over again. Return is your res. That's nice and straightforward. You get a single target res, and then healers will also get a group res. It gives you some cool sandy effects. It's neat. This one is Tip the Scales. 2 minute cooldown. Healing Evokers will also get this, and it makes your next empowered spell instantly cast at maximum empower levels. So you can use that to get a big fire breath out. You'll also have other empower spells that we'll get to shortly, but that's it's really useful on healing because some of your big heals are empower spells, and being able to instant cast, it's kind of like a Nature Swiftness if you've ever used that. So that's all of the regular base Evoker spells that this starter spec has given me. There are other buttons that you could potentially have that the starter spec has not given me. And I can even like take points out and put them back in. So right now I'm spec to have Deep Breath stun things. I don't need that. Let's save that point. And I'm instead going to take Cauterizing Flame, maybe? Yeah. Oh, you can have Landslide's cooldown get reduced and have it withstand more damage before breaking. That's kind of cool. There's some cool self-healing things that Drakthir can get, or Evokers can get. Scarlet Adaptation is kind of cool. You're healing, 20% of it gets stored up to a cap, and then your next damaging Living Flame does some damage. So if you're healing and you occasionally sprinkle in a DPS Living Flame, it's gonna use some of your healing to do that. Or not use it, but like scale off of healing that you've done. This one has healing yourself with Living Flame. It make your next one go really fast, which you could use to kind of like, I mean, a lot of your healing is not going to be from Living Flame, but if you're just spam healing yourself out and questing, that's kind of nice. And then this here is actually really cool. Renewing Blaze on a 1.5 minute cooldown. If you take it, gives you 8 seconds of having 100% of the damage you take get healed back over 14 seconds. Combine that with Obsidian Scales, and you have a very powerful sort of durability defensive cooldown, which is something that I miss not having it being a priest. The point underneath it, you can have it either reduce the cooldown of it, so you can do it every 1 minute, or you can make the initial effect increase your healing taken as well. So it's a nice defensive, it's a nice self-healing. That's something that I'm probably going to run around with a lot as a healing evoker. But for the moment, let's just take Cauterizing Flame. Yeah, sure. Cauterizing Flame is a 1 minute cooldown, also available to healers, and it will take off any bleed, poison, curse, or disease. All of them. Somebody can be running around with 2 bleeds, a poison, and a disease, and Cauterizing Flame will clean them all off, and it will heal when it removes an effect. So that's really, it's a 1 minute cooldown, but being able to take off anything once a minute in addition to your magic and poison on your regular dispel is crazy. Super, super cool. Oh, I only have 3 more buttons to put on my bar. Okay, we have Pyre, which is your other spender. We've seen the Mouth Beam spender, which is your single target channeled damage. Costs 3 essences, easy to understand. Pyre is an instant cast that only costs 2 essences, and it cleaves. It does fire damage to the target and nearby enemies. So you can see you chuck out a big fireball, it goes boom, and hits nearby stuff. You have a lot of abilities. It's the very top point here in Devastation. You have a lot of stuff that kind of messes with that, and you can have those be free. So Pyre, right now, its essence cost is reduced by 1. I guess maybe by default it costs 3. It has a chance to flare up and explode again on a nearby target because of my 2 points in volatility. It, what else is modifying Pyre? Anything? Is that it? That might be it for the moment. While channeling Disintegrate, my fire breath will tick faster. That's kind of cool. Or deal damage more often. Damage and crits deal more damage. Yeah. So that's Pyre. That's a sort of a cleavy spender. If you're doing damage against a lot of targets, you're going to want to use that to spend your essences instead of Disintegrate, unless you have something that you want to channel down. Dragon Rage is a cooldown, big ol' cooldown, 2 minutes, and Dragon Rage will spit out a bunch of pyres for you. And then for 14 seconds, you have an increased chance for Essence Burst, which is your proc that lets you use your spenders for free. And you're going to get your maximum benefit of your mastery regardless of your target's health. So that makes it a good time to talk about the mastery. Evoker mastery has to do with the target's health. For healers, it has to do with the health of the target they're healing, I think. And then for Devastation Evokers, we can just read it here. Giant Killer. Increases the damage of your spells by up to 22.5%. Based on the current health of your target, with higher health targets taking more damage. Evokers are going to be very big on the beginning of pulls, and they're going to be decent. Their mastery is going to be effective on things like outdoor questing when you're doing a lot of damage from things at top health, and ad fights when you get to attack like a lot of clean health things. That's what your mastery does. And then your cooldown, your Dragon Rage, gives you your maximum mastery benefit regardless of your target's health. So that's a great thing to have, you know, during like execute and whatever. So the thing with Empower spells is that they have pretty sizable cooldowns, whereas Essence Spenders are spammable. So your your Fire Breath is a 30-second cooldown. You can only do it twice a minute. Eternity Surge is also a 30-second cooldown. So that's our next Empower spell to talk about. Dragon Breath is your cone that puts dots in a target and does fire damage over time. Eternity Surge is your blue Empower spell. And this can be used as a single target spell, but the further you empower it, the more enemies it's going to damage. So if you're just fighting one thing, you can totally Eternity Surge just the one category and you're going to hit just one thing. But if you charge it up more, you can cleave with it. And it's a 30-second cooldown. So just like you could Fire Breath to throw a dot on multiple things, and then next you could Eternity Surge to cleave both of them. It's not really an either or. But I would assume that you want to make sure that you are not capped on essences. So, you know, chuck out a pyre or do a thing. But then you have a little bit of time while your essences are still powering back up. And that's time that you could be working on getting yourself a nice Fire Breath going. Or here, let's charge up an Eternity Surge. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. We can see that hit 2 targets that were in front of me. It would have done more, but maybe they were out of range to an enemy. Yeah, I don't know what the range of it is. 25-yard range, obviously, but I don't know if it's going to hit things behind me. Probably not. So we can look at Pyre. We can search that, and it's going to talk about a lot of different things. Oh, that's really cool. I like that a lot. So if I want to see everything that talks about like Essence Burst, you can see everything that, yeah, Essence Burst is a chance to not be consumed. Oh, that's cool. I like that. I wish that worked in the talent in the spell book, but I like that for the talent tree a lot. Okie dokie. That's all the spells that she has in this build. There are more spells that you can get if you spec yourself differently. If you want more of an AoE spell, this Firestorm is a 20-second cooldown, does damage to enemies within like a range. It's like a circle you put on the ground. You can have Living Flame reset the cooldown of that. You can have Fire Breath make your Living Flames instant cast. There's lots of different things you can do. This is just kind of like the starter build, default loadout. And it's also only at level 60, so you get another 10 points. And that's something that's important to remember when Dragonflight pre-patch comes out and you get your new talents, is you're going to be building your talent build and you're going to be like, wait, I can't get my cool stuff. And you can't forget that you're going to get 10 more points as you level to 70.